Hello and welcome to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz, and today we are going over all the relevant waiver wire options ahead of Week 6. We got some bye weeks, specifically the Falcons, Jets, Saints, and 49ers will not have to play professional football for this week. Gonna rest up, so we got some fill-ins to talk and just some general injury replacements and some studs that we just would rather have on our team. And by we, I mean myself. And as always on this edition of the PFF Fantasy Football Podcast, Dwain "The Rock" McFarland. Dwain, how are you?
Man, I'm doing good. Looking forward to tonight's game. We have one left. I like the idea of Ravens and throwing the ball, even if it's just a little bit more, Ian. It gets me excited.
Lamar Jackson, number 1 in yards per completion, number 1 in yards per rush, and number 1 in your hearts. So we will go through quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end, get some suggested fabs, give our order of the guys as we feel for this fit, as for this week is fit, and then also just some general banter along the way. So first off, we're going to start with the quarterback room. I think the top 5 streamers this week, and again, we're basing this usually on Yahoo and Fantrax, guys that are available in 50% or fewer of leagues. Top 5 options, in my humble opinion, is Trevor Lawrence against the Dolphins, Taylor Heinicke against the Chiefs, Geno Smith against the Steelers, Sam Darnold against the Vikings, and Daniel Jones, if active, against the Rams. For those that didn't see that Giants game, Daniel Jones did suffer a pretty gnarly concussion. Hopefully he is feeling better, but we're not sure if he is going to be ready to go by Sunday. Dwain, when I look at this group, first of all, I was surprised Darnold even qualified. He's the QB9 on the season. I think he should be the top streamer of the week if he is available in your league. Going up against this Vikings defense that, I think some of their stats are flawed because of how bad Baker was against them in Week 4. As it stands, Patrick Peterson, Bashaud Breeland, in only 5 games, they've given up 39 catches, 541 yards, 6 touchdowns. Have they picked off a single pass? No, they haven't. We're getting Christian McCaffrey back. Out of these 5, Dwain, would you agree Sam Darnold should be the preferred ad if you just need a quarterback for Week 6 and Week 6 only?
Yeah, I think it's easily Darnold. We've seen him score. He's finished as the QB3, the QB1. Yeah, he had a QB27 last week, but, we've talked about this. All players have down weeks, and so this was Darnold. So we'll see. It could be the beginning of a bigger trend, but right now I'm going to believe in the first 4 games that we saw from Darnold over just, the most recent one.
After him, I do lean Taylor Heinicke. Now, he, like Darnold, had a bit of a down game last week. Tough Saints defense, and he had a couple boneheaded picks in there. With that said, since he took over that job in Week 2, we've seen the rushing floor. He's had 25 rushing yards per game this year, and he's ripped off QB13, QB9, QB5, and then most recently, QB23 performances. So this matchup, man, they're facing the Chiefs, a pissed-off Chiefs, at least offense. I'm not even sure if a pissed-off Chiefs defense is going to change anything the way they can't slow down anyone right now, but Chiefs ranked dead last in both points per game overall and fantasy points per game to quarterbacks. Dwain, Heinicke versus Lawrence versus Geno versus Daniel Jones. Are you with me?
Yeah, I like Lawrence slightly more, but I would just flip those two. I would have it, Darnold, like we both said to start, then I would go Lawrence, then I would go Heinicke. And the main thing with Lawrence is just continue to see more design rushing plays. So he's had 12%, 22%, and 14% over the last 3 weeks, which is something we kind of expected to see out of the gate. Scramble rate's also solid, 7, and 8%. To your point, like Heinicke's no slouch on the ground. Like he's averaging, 25 yards. He's hitting that 25 yards per game mark, which is great. I could see this one going either way really easily, Ian. It's that Washington's going to have to throw against the Chiefs. This will be, a for sure get-right game for Patrick Mahomes. Washington football team is the get-right game for everyone. Yeah. Doesn't matter if it's Jameis Winston. It doesn't matter. It can literally be, it could be you or me, and it would be a get-right game.
That's what's crazy about this matchup. Washington and Kansas City rank 32nd and 31st in scoring defense and fantasy points allowed to QBs. So, yeah, I still think I lean Heinicke. I think he has the rushing floor that we're hoping Lawrence can get. But, man, Lawrence, I think, certainly did show off that sneaky ceiling he can have even in a game yesterday where I don't think he looked all that great because he had a QB8 finish pre-Monday Night Football, and like at the end of the game he was an inch away from scoring another rushing touchdown, and then Carlos Hyde got stuffed on 4th and goal because of course Urban Meyer felt the need to give it to Carlos Hyde on 4th and goal.
It's funny, really all of these guys are dealing with banged up weapons as well.
Yeah.
I mean, Heinicke's dealing, Curtis Samuel's hurt again. We don't know if Diami Brown will be back for this game. Logan Thomas is out. You've got Daniel Jones dealing with Kenny Golladay hurt. We'll talk about him later. You got Sterling Shepard out. We'll talk about Toney in a minute. It sounds like he won't be suspended or anything, but it's like all these teams are doing. Trevor Lawrence, lost DJ Chark the week before, so they're all dealing with limited weapons. Besides, I think that's what makes Darnold also the slam dunk, is just all of his weapons are going to be healthy.
Now, if Daniel Jones is active, are we still putting Heinicke and Lawrence ahead of him? Because I kind of think we should, at least for this week. Danny Dimes, we've talked about him this year. He's been playing some great football, but you take away Saquon, Golladay, Shepard, Slayton, and we have the potential for Jason Garrett to maybe look in the mirror and say, hey, you know what, maybe I shouldn't be running our franchise quarterback as often as I am, not to mention the tough matchup against Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey and company. If Jones is cleared, Dwain, would you adjust this list, or do you think he slides in behind these other guys?
I think what we would have to see, and for me, would be Jones cleared, but also Sterling Shepard's going to play and Kenny Golladay are going to play. If you saw that, I would probably move him back up, because concussion, I mean, once you've had one, it's not like you're carrying that much greater risk. It's like anything else. So I would lean back to Daniel Jones, in that case, just because the Rams really haven't been the Rams defense, this season. But I doubt we're going to get all of those dominoes to fall like perfectly for us before this game. So yeah, I think where we've got him ranked right now in the list is good.
Geno Smith, I understand if people are here in a 14-team league, there's not many quarterbacks available, you lost Russ, or you just need someone for a couple weeks. I think from that context, maybe you want to prioritize Geno a little bit more because we do have Fitzpatrick possibly coming back in week 7 and things like that. But even then, Dwain, I think we saw a really fun Thursday night performance from Geno, and that's probably it. And unless the Seahawks just completely change who they are on offense, we're now going to see Geno get dropped into a situation that is not quarterback friendly. It's only been quarterback friendly because Russell Wilson has been the entire offense during his time there. I mean, right now they're below average in play action rate, and the biggest joke, how many Shane Waldron pre-snap motion, pre-snap shifts articles did we read this offseason? And they're the 5th worst team in terms of just the amount of times they do that. So at least for this week, and usually with these waiver shows, particularly for quarterback, we're looking more so at 1 week streamer options. I mean, this Sunday night game, Seahawks-Steelers, game total is only at 42. Again, I understand if you need someone for the next 5-6 weeks to try to carry you while Russell Wilson is out. But Dwayne, for this week, I would really prefer not to start Geno Smith if I can handle it.
You should not be starting Geno Smith against the Steelers front 7. You just shouldn't. It's what you said. The pass volume environment is poor. The run volume environment is poor. It's like everything about the offense is bad. They're slow. They can't manage any kind. They're 32nd in the league in time of possession. They've only held the ball for 41% of the total time available to them in games. That's by far the worst in the league. It's terrible. So there's just a lot of problems going on with the offense right now. Honestly, Ian, I worry about, we can talk about this maybe in a minute, but the trickle down. Because think about it, we've had DK, we've had Lockett, we've had these guys living on these razor-thin volume margins, for years because Russ is so good. Now you take Russ away and you give a team a week to get ready for Geno. You also give Geno a week to get in his own head. I just worry, this could be a complete disaster for the entire Seahawks offense.
It's either going to be a disaster or it's going to work out because they start doing smart things, and that'll be hilarious because it's why wouldn't you just do these things?
We see crap like that all the time. All of a sudden they'll come out and run 70 plays. There'll be motion all over the place.
Chucking DK Metcalf's getting 12 targets per game. Oh my gosh. For hilarity's sake, I kind of do hope that is the way it goes.
Me too.
All right, everyone. So quickly on these 5 quarterbacks, go get Sam Darnold as your streamer if he is available. If not, Dwayne and I are a little bit disagreement. I would go Taylor Heinicke after that. Trevor Lawrence 3rd. Dwayne would flip them. Either way, that is a clear tier below Darnold, and it can go either way. I'm not trying to say I have a huge lean on Heinicke over Lawrence just by a razor-thin edge. And then Daniel Jones, if he's cleared and if he gets some of these weapons back, we could see hopping over Heinicke and Lawrence. Geno, try to avoid that if at all possible. It is funny with Geno, man. I think it was our guy, Trevor Siakam, that brought this up. Eli Manning's longest, career or current longest start streak gets snapped because Geno Smith comes in. Russell Wilson's long start streak gets snapped because of Geno Smith. Like, I hope eventually Geno's just like given some like all-time backup QB card, and so like you're in a game and all of a sudden the quarterback gets hurt and you just hear like Geno Smith's music start blasting on the loudspeakers and he comes walking out of the tunnel.
I did not remember Geno being part of Peyton Manning's thing. I thought
no,
that was
Eli.
Oh, Eli. I was like, that was like Painter or something like that. Some guy. So it was Eli too? Geno was there when that happened? I don't recall that for whatever reason. Huh.
It was when
I'm usually pretty good at that kind of trivia. But
Eli got randomly benched like in week 13 or week 14. And then he immediately got the job back the next week after pretty much the entire state of New York lost their minds over it. So Geno Smith just out there snatching streaks and all that. Gotta love it. Looking out for Brett Favre's probably unbeatable long streak. Now, at the running back position, we got quite a few guys to go over. So, first of all, with the Bears, David Montgomery is out through week 7 at a minimum. They can start to open up his practice window in week 8. With that said, not a guarantee he comes back immediately from the injured reserve list, and the Bears have a bye in week 10. So, we could be looking at another 4 usable weeks for Damian Williams and the new back to the party, Khalil Herbert. Again, last week when we were ranking these running backs, we had Damian Williams as a low-end RB2 with the potential to shoot up to RB1 status, very similar to how we treated Chuba Hubbard in the aftermath of Christian McCaffrey's injury. We just don't exactly know how these things are going to break out until we see the utilization. And now I send it over to the expert in utilization, Dwain McFarland, because Dwain, you got some good numbers that shows us Khalil Herbert was pretty much as much, if not more, involved in Damian Williams yesterday.
Yeah, man, it was a real curveball, to be honest. 53% of the snaps, 49% of the rushing attempts. He was out there for 26% of the routes. Short down and distance, handled 60%, so that's 1 or 2 yards to go on 3rd or 4th down. Long down and distance, which is 2nd, 3rd, or 4th down, and over 3 or more yards to go, he was only out there for 25%, but he got 100% of the 2-minute offense. So it's just kind of, it was a weird hodgepodge of things for Herbert, but I think what we can probably expect is he's going to handle about half of the rushing attempts. I would expect Damian Williams to still remain, the lead back when it comes to the passing downs, but, maybe it could be like a 55-45 split, from a rushing attempts, in favor of, Herbert. It's probably going to be pretty close, but yeah, I think Herbert has some value. The only problem you have, with this is the Bears' offense is terrible. So I don't know how many weeks they can really support, 2 backs in. But yes, it is something. It's enough that when I saw this, Herbert's a young player. They obviously like him. He's at least going to have, 50 to 40% of this backfield until we get David Montgomery back.
But that was my biggest takeaway. Like, this Bears offense has gotten to play miraculously back-to-back games with really positive game script. I don't think that's coming, man, at least in the next 2 weeks. They got the Packers this week, the Buccaneers next week, 49ers and Steelers after that. Like, that's our window for Herbert and Damian, essentially. Like, we do our rankings usually Tuesday night, Wednesday morning. I don't know if either of these guys are going to be in the top 24. We got some teams on the bye now, but if anything, I think Herbert, he's going to be well above where we had him last week, but I wouldn't call him this like must-start guy, even if you happen to land him. Like, hey, if you need help at running back, I was on some teams last week where I just needed to have a viable person, so I just had to, unfortunately, maybe spend up a little bit more than I wanted to on someone like Kenneth Gainwell, Zach Moss, someone that you don't love, but someone that, hey, you need a running back to fill in that slot. Okay, from that standpoint, I'm cool getting Khalil Herbert, but Dwain, 10-15% fab at the absolute most. Like, I think this is kind of a trap. I think we just saw Khalil Herbert's best game he's going to have this year.
Yeah, I wouldn't put a lot into it. And, to your point, we only have one data point, and the Bears led the game the whole way. So it could be something where it's more like a 60-40, 65-35 split in favor of Damian Williams in different conditions. It was interesting. Khalil Herbert was pretty active early on. It wasn't just a late in the game kind of thing. So I don't want to completely dismiss what he did, but it is just one data point. We still don't really know enough. It's all we have, so we have to go off of it, right? It's not like we could just wait and see on all these things. Because if you want Herbert, you're going to have to snatch him up this week. He won't be there, next week. But yes, I would not spend, big fab money on him. Eventually you're going to have Montgomery back, which you already pointed out. So I think it's a 5 to 10% at most.
Cool.
I like more like 5% because Ian, I really don't know how I'm even going to put the guy in the lineup.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, I think the 10 to 15 I threw out was too high. You're right. It should be much closer to 5. So out of this list, I think there's 3 guys that are really going to be headlining a lot of these waiver wire articles that everyone's going to be reading. I have Herbert ranked 3rd. The second guy I think people should be going out to get is Darrel Williams. As we all saw last night on Sunday Night Football, Clyde Edwards-Helaire suffered that nasty-looking injury. Good news from Adam Schefter is that he's only suffered a sprained MCL and he's only expected to miss, quote-unquote, a few weeks per his sources. So not a season-ending injury or anything like that. With that said, we still got Jerick McKinnon there. We've seen the Chiefs, literally as recently as last year, add someone like Le'Veon Bell mid-season and give him a pretty quick role. So Darrel Williams, he's got Washington this week. Hey man, he was already splitting a lot of snaps and carries with Clyde, more so than I think people realize over the past few weeks as it was, expecting him to be the lead dog. But Dwain, how much is that lead dog worth in Kansas City? Because what we talk about saying Clyde being a sell high, and no, for the love of God, I am not trying to victory lap this dude getting hurt. No. Please, people, realize that. But our point was, even though Clyde had back-to-back weeks with over 100 yards and a touchdown, going into last week, he was the RB30 in expected fantasy points. So they don't really throw the ball at these guys. You take away Clyde, maybe that does mean Darrel Williams takes on a larger percentage of the offense, but I'm just not super confident he's going to fully pull away from Jerick McKinnon. So Dwain, overall thoughts on this situation? Again, I do think he's the preferred ad over Herbert because I see Darrel being the featured guy, at least having a chance to be the sole featured guy more so than Herbert has, who is stuck in that 2-back committee with Dame. But at the same time, if anything, we're losing Clyde. I think that just could result in what we saw in the playoffs last year, and that's the Chiefs throwing the piss out of the ball each and every game.
Yeah, I think you're hitting this one, from the right, perspective, in my opinion. Looking at the utilization, I think this could very well be Jerick McKinnon taking over the role that Darrel Williams was in before. And now Darrel Williams is in Clyde Edwards-Helaire's role until, CEH comes back. So if you looked at yesterday's game, 100% of the 2-minute offense now went to Jerick McKinnon, 57% of the long down and distance.
This is what the Bears did to us. What? Oh, my God.
I know. So, and look, supposedly when they brought McKinnon in, that was kind of the word on the street, right, was that Andy Reid wanted to basically use him anytime they decided they were going to go tempo, right? Which is what we call the 2-minute offense here. And so McKinnon is finally stepping into that role. I would be surprised if he didn't handle at least half of the passing down duties, with Williams handling the other half. But I do think Williams will be, the leader on the ground. But it's just to your point, if you look at the Chiefs and you look at their average rush volume, on a per week basis, I have it right here. Hang on one second. Right now, in regulation, this gets rid of overtime games. But the Chiefs where are they? Well, they're 21 carries, 21 rushing attempts, per game. So, if you can get half to 60% of that, you're getting 12 to 13 carries, and then you're praying for 2 or 3 targets. Now, it is the Chiefs. So, we know it's an offense that can get going despite the challenges that they've had over the last couple of weeks because of the way defenses are, this last year now. We're going back almost a year of the Chiefs not being able to figure out the 2 high safeties and all this stuff. So, but it could change, right? There's a chance Williams, gets even more, right, than what Clyde Edwards-Helaire was getting. But what I would bank on would really be probably playing a very similar role to CEH for the next whatever it is, 2 to 4 weeks. And you just use it while you can. I do agree that of the players that we're talking through, he's one of the top options, for the weekend.
And just remember, people, in the playoff stretch last year, I think that's kind of our most usable split that we have for Darrel Williams. Clyde was very limited during that, almost in a Jerick McKinnon role, and Le'Veon Bell was just completely out of the picture, wasn't even active for the playoffs last year. And in that, Darrel Williams had 17 touches in the Mahomes got injured, anything is possible game, then 14, and then only 4 in the Super Bowl when they actually had to play with some negative game scripts. So again, the Chiefs, like the Bills, smart team that aren't just going to run their running back 15 times into the heart of the defense just to be able to quote unquote establish the run. So Darrel, we like it, but don't love it. Dwain, this one I think, again, a little bit more than Herbert, but again, anything more than 10 to 15%, I'm probably not feeling too comfortable about it.
Yeah, me either. I think he's a 10 to 20%er, depending on your situation, depending on your waiver wire, your league, all those sorts of things. If you're playing in a really deep league and you've got to win the next 2 games and you have nothing else at RB2, then you may go towards the upper end of that range and you feel fine about it. But you have to your team. I think the main message here from you and I, Ian, is like, look, it's not something that's going to last all season,
right?
And he's not really a great talent, so it's like there's nothing there, right, for me to get excited about. Like if it was even a player that I was like, man, like he could maybe, if he gets out there and plays well, like he could just take away more of the role. Like I don't even see that happening,
No.
So it's just a situation where at best he just kind of muddles things even further for everybody going on through the rest of the season. Like that's his best case scenario outside of this 2 to 4 game window.
Now, the number one back that I would want for this week and this week only, and I say number one lightly, I don't think this is a very strong waiver wire week to begin with, but the guy I would spend more on than Darrel, then Khalil Herbert for this week is DeVontae Booker. Saquon Barkley is believed to have suffered a low ankle sprain per NFL Network's Ian Rapoport. The injury is expected to knock him out next week. He'll have more tests, best characterized as week to week. Great, insightful note from head coach Joe Judge, who said, hopefully we dodged a couple of bullets there, and so gave us absolutely nothing. Thanks, Joe. The one, I guess, interesting note that I came upon, Dwain, because we were talking about this last night, and I assumed with Elijah Penny getting their kind of rush attempts, and for those that don't know, Penny's a borderline fullback, just a big grinder that's not going to do anything in the passing game. I assumed Penny would be the one getting the majority of I thought they would have a running back on the practice squad that we could see coming up. But from my understanding, their number 3 running back was Gary Brightwell, who was actually active, but he only played special teams. So even after Saquon got hurt, Brightwell didn't come in for anything. It's one of these things, again, where it sounds like Saquon's going to only be out 1 to 2 weeks as opposed to, 5 to 6. So don't go crazy on Booker. But out of Herbert, Darrel, and Booker, in terms of the touch floor, I feel like Booker has the best chance.
I agree. I mean, we saw last night that Booker did handle everything. And I saw the same thing when I was looking at this team. I was like, Brightwell was active.
Right, I was surprised.
So I think we can expect basically he's going to have Saquon's role. He won't, be as efficient. But I mean, you're probably looking at, to your point, even if the Giants have a terrible game, he's probably guaranteed 15 touches, right? And if the Giants are even anywhere decent, like if they're just average, he's probably going to have 18 to 20 touches in the game for the week. So I would say if you are the Barkley fantasy manager, you could be a little more aggressive with Booker. But you got to look at it long term and say, look, I know I've got bye weeks, all these different things coming up I'm going to have to manage through. But if you can look at your roster and you see a path where you could just keep Booker on the roster, right? For the season, as your Saquon cuff, then that gives him a little more value and you could justify a little bit more from a fab perspective. But if you're not the Saquon manager, I think he really fits in the same fab range as the rest of these other guys, Ian. You might just make him slightly higher and you just kind of have these all set up like his backup bids. You're not going nuts on any one of them. You're putting all of them at what you think, basically you just want to give yourself a chance to land one of them, for the week. And if it's just trying to get through the week, I do believe, to your point, it's Booker, it's Williams, and then the next player I think we're talking about is Collins, and I would put him third. I would put him over Herbert as well.
Okay. I like that call. And just back to Brightwell. He actually played 8 snaps in week 1. I wonder if that was like just strictly incomplete mop-up duty. But yeah, because I was seeing if they had, earlier in the year when they were limiting Saquon, if they had a third back in that committee, and they didn't. So that's basically all it kind of comes down to.
Yeah, his name was Daniel Jones.
That's what it comes down to with this top tier. It's like Darrel is going to lose work to McKinnon. Herbert is going to lose work to Damian. Booker doesn't look like he's going to lose work to anyone. So we will have and chase that volume all day long. Let's talk about Alex Collins, who I only have him 4th, and I wouldn't be against going 3rd, but it's because of this Chris Carson. All right, so here's what we know about Chris Carson. It's called a long-term neck condition, but then in the same breath, Pete Carroll's saying he's day-to-day. So I'm not exactly sure. A long-term neck condition doesn't really sound day-to-day to me, but apparently it is. And it is too early to tell if he'll play in week 6. The usage last week was fantastic, though. 15 carries, 3 targets, 71% snap rate. I know people might be a little bit disappointed by the total counting numbers he put forward. We also need to consider what this offense will look like post-Russell Wilson. But Dwain, at least compared to Darrel and Herbert, I think we can't expect Collins, if Carson is out of the picture, which is not nearly as set in stone as the other guys, but if he is, then Collins is looking pretty damn good here.
Yeah, you hit it all. 71% of the snaps, 68% of the rushing attempts, 58% of the routes. He didn't show up big in the box score. He's RB36 on the week. But all the underlyings looked really good. He's not going to handle the long down and distance or the 2-minute work, so it's going to be kind of similar to what we're seeing with some of these other situations. None of these backs besides Booker is really going to just slot in to handle an every down type of role. We're not going to see that with Collins either. I'll tell you, though, like Collins is a tricky one because, like, part of me, like, I agree with your point that, like, we have no clue what's even going to happen this week with Chris Carson. But we know that the Seahawks are also a team that are really tough to trust with any kind of injury, information. We know that historically Pete Carroll, he's an optimistic person. He's also very optimistic about his players' return timetables, back from injury. So the one thing I would say with Collins is he potentially could be the one that plays the longest out of the whole group we're talking about. Like, what if Chris Carson really is going to miss 5, 6, 7 games? Then that all of a sudden I think Collins carries the most.
If he's not on IR, though, I don't think we can consider that if he's not on IR. Like, that just doesn't make a little bit of sense.
I don't know. If I had to pick one of these players and I'm like, okay, which one has the biggest upside to play the longest, I think it's Collins. You could argue it's Damian Williams. We don't know how long Montgomery for sure will be out, but I think Collins is the one that has a sneaky upside to how many games he could need to play, for the season. If it's because a lot of times these teams don't do this. They don't put a player on IR for whatever reason. Look, like the 49ers kept Kittle active all the way till the end of last week. Like they knew he wasn't going to be able to play that game. They knew that before Friday. And then it's, to IR on Saturday night, So I know some of it's around the calendar and the way they work different things. So I would say they're just like us too. They're human beings. Like they're talking to the doctors and they're hoping. They're like, well, okay, so you're telling me he could be ready next week. And the doc's like, yeah, but he could also not be ready next week. And they're like, okay, so they're just like us. They're stuck. It's like, what do? We don't want to put him on IR because then their next question to the doctor is like, well, if we give him 3 weeks, is it really going to make a difference? And if the answer to that is no, it could be better tomorrow, it could be better in 8 weeks, we don't know. Well, then that puts the team in a weird spot. So just something to consider, as I was thinking through it. I agree, like the best way to approach it is once they hit IR, just realize it's not a perfect science for these teams.
Yeah, and we did have Zach Taylor's infamous, Joe Mixon's day-to-day for like the last 3 months of
exactly.
2020. So good points all around. Last one, who I think, I hope we're in agreement on, Rhamondre Stevenson, had a bunch of carries. I think it was like 10 or 11 yesterday. Didn't do too much with him. But basically, Damon Harris, who checked out of yesterday's game, per Ian Rapoport, he was limited with rib and chest injuries, but tests ultimately ruled out anything significant, and he is best described as day-to-day. So the only notes here, Stevenson, who was the RB1, that did happen with J.J. Taylor as a healthy scratch. So we know Brandon Bolden has the pass game work, and I really think Stevenson and J.J. Taylor would more or less split the early down work if Damian Harris is ultimately ruled out, which he doesn't seem to actually be. So, Dwain, any interest in Stevenson?
Just a minimum bid and really deep formats. It's to your point. Like, look, the Patriots want this to be a backfill by committee, no matter what. Like, if it means signing Ian Hartitz off the street so that they can play 3 backs, it's like that's what they do. So, I'm not super interested. In deep formats, if you want to throw 2 to 5% out there on Rhamondre Stevenson and just stash him away, okay. The problem I have with it is like, what am I hoping for? Like that, 3 more players get hurt. It's like no matter what, it feels like there's always this revolving door, and we know for sure Damian Harris is not hurt long term. Right? We know he's probably going to play this week, but let's just say he was a scratch for this week, okay? Even in the 1 week, I don't know for sure what we get out of Stevenson, and we're probably not getting more than a week.
The Laviska Shenault prophecy, where you're just only 3 injuries away from becoming a complete fantasy superstar. All right,
I like that. The Shenault prophecy, yes.
Out of these 5, Dwain, I got DeVontae Booker, Darrel Williams. I agree with you. Alex Collins, then Khalil Herbert, Rhamondre Stevenson. You good with that order?
Yep.
Fantastic. Moving right along to wide receiver. I think there's a big one this week, and his name is Kadarius Toney. And if you guys want to go see some cool-ass plays that show not only his route running ability, but contested catch skills, and most importantly, when this guy finally gets the ball in his hands, go check out my Twitter at Ian Hartitz, and I put together a fun clip despite the best efforts of NFL Game Pass to sabotage everything I wanted to freaking do there. But whatever. That's in the past. And yeah, he looked special, everyone. It wasn't just the Cowboys game. We started to see flashes of that in the Saints game as well. So I asked Twitter, I was like, why the hell did this take until week 4 and all 3 receivers to get injured for this to happen in the first place? And okay, I get it. He had COVID throughout training camp. I understand he couldn't have been fully up to speed with the offense potentially. But I'm also old enough to remember, Dwain, when CJ Board was getting design reverses in week 2 as Kadarius Toney was active and standing on the sidelines. So I'm not exactly giving Jason Garrett a pass on making all of us think that Kadarius Toney wasn't going to be someone that was explosive with the ball in his hands and was going to be able to provide his fantasy production. Because, man, Shepard, Slayton, Kenny G, all being out, that's what it took for someone this good to get featured. So with Toney, I understand we can't feel great about him super long term because Shepard, Slayton, we would think based on the IR idea that if you're going to be out longer than 3 weeks, you're going to be put on IR to begin with. Slayton and Shepard would be due to come back this week. With Kenny Golladay, again, going back to Joe Judge's extremely helpful quote, hopefully we dodge a couple bullets there. We're not exactly sure how that knee's feeling. So, Dwain, I guess the question is, how much fab are you comfortable using on Toney? Because on the one hand, he has shown that he deserves to be fed the ball more than anyone other than Saquon Barkley in this offense, I feel like. On the other hand, we saw that they weren't going to give him this role until everyone got hurt in the first place.
Yeah, it's a tricky one, but at this point in the season, when you see talent flash like this, I think it could be an absolute cluster. Don't get me wrong. It could be a complete disaster. But when you get a chance to draft, to go grab talent like this that you didn't have to draft, right? It just doesn't happen that often, and it could completely bust. But he is the number 1 waiver wire ad of the week because of because of the clips you put together. This wasn't just a pure utilization thing. He looked really good. And so he was targeted on 54% of the time he ran a route, he was targeted. So they didn't have him out there all the time, even with all these injuries going, even through the early part of the game. They were somehow finding a way, to limit, the work that he was getting, but it was still healthy. He was still getting really healthy work. So, he was out there for the majority. I would, not he wasn't in the 90% range, but he was out there for the majority of routes until, he got knocked out of the game due to, his temper tantrum. But yeah, I think with Toney, he's the number 1 ad of the week, and you just got to find a way, to get him on your squad, especially if you're, sitting at the top of a waiver queue, right? And you're the one with the number 1 pick this week. If you're talking about fab, if you're in a small, league, 8-team type league, that doesn't have super deep benches or anything, you can get Toney for nothing, and he may actually be hard. Depending on your roster, you may not even be able to go after him. You may be loaded. But once you get into the medium, 10-team leagues, you get up into the 12-team leagues, especially if they have deep benches, that's where I would be really aggressive with Toney. At this point, I haven't actually written my Giants part yet, Ian, so I would take your feedback on this as well, but just me thinking historically, playing in a lot, of leagues, I think he's a 30 to 50% guy. You could argue more, and I'm telling you, he could be a complete bust. You just don't get a chance to get a player that looks as good as he did. That's the thing. And you're making a bet on talent, knowing that, look, this could be a complete disaster. I may not have hardly any fab for the rest of the year, but, we're heading into week 6, and I'm calling my shot now, trying to save my season, or trying to make sure that I insulate myself and continue my playoff run.
He is not Justin Jefferson. He's not Justin Jefferson. I swear to God, if social media guy pulls this out the wrong way, I'm going to be pissed. I was as impressed by his performance over the past 2 weeks as I was in Justin Jefferson's coming out party against the Titans last year. Like, when the usage meets someone looking that good, that explosive in all facets of being a receiver on the field, we want to go get him. He's not a gadget guy. He made multiple great catches downfield in contested coverage, people. Like, this is legit. I am with you, Dwain. Let's go and get ourselves Kadarius Toney. We don't.
So how high would you be willing to go, Ian? Having watched, you've got to obviously watch like every basically
50
snap he's had.
Seems a little high. I would probably go up to 40. I think that's a little bit more fair with it. I guess the thing with Toney is, and like we're going to talk about this with the other receivers, but we don't have chances to get the potential like a talented number one this late in the season. Usually it's a backup stepping into a projected larger role that we hope works out, or it's like a wide receiver 3 that we realize is a little bit better than we thought, and okay, we can get some decent value. Toney's ceiling compared to the usual guy we see on the waiver wire is the moon.
Exactly. Yeah. That's the difference. That's why I'm actually wondering like if 50% is too low. And again, it is risky, but like you can't always play things safe. There's certain players that will make me break rules, even though the utilization, everything may not be there yet. But just what I saw, of him playing, and I watched a lot of that game. Obviously because I'm a Cowboys fan, I watched pretty much every snap of it. Like he didn't look like he could be covered. And okay, so
I would say this: if you want to go 50 or higher, and you're a roster that is needy on wide receiver, and Toney could be someone to actually come in and start with a sense of urgency, okay, I think that's fair. But as someone that I think really live by the anchor RB strategy of more drafts than not this year, thinking about my own teams, I am more better at wide receiver than running back. So I like to keep the fab a little more open for the running back position. But yeah, if you need a wide receiver, I can't really think of a better scenario.
It's got to come down to your roster construction, like what you're saying.
Cool. Yep. All right, other 4 guys, I'm going to quickly run through them, and Dwain, you can kind of just give me your order and just overall thoughts on it. Amon-Ra St. Brown has been playing well the last few weeks, and he should benefit from slightly more condensed target share with Quintez Cephas, potentially out the rest of the year with a broken collarbone. With that said, still have Khalif Raymond, Kadarius Hodge, who I honestly did not realize was on the Lions and not the Browns anymore until I was preparing for this waiver wire article. So Amon-Ra St. Brown, okay, you're maybe getting 5-6 targets, but if anything, I think the last few weeks of these wide receivers in Detroit have been a fugazi. We talked about TJ Hawkinson's low target numbers. I think those are destined to go up. Honestly, I think week 1 when we saw Hawkinson, Swift, and Jamal leading the way was the most predictable week here for the future. Again, just without Cephas, they get the ball to their best players. It is Hawkinson and their 2 running backs. Marquez Callaway is on a bye. People might be a little fooled by that 2-touchdown total. From my understanding, Michael Thomas is going to come back this year. Like, I haven't heard that he's completely out. Once he is back, Callaway is completely done. And there's 2 touchdowns, people. One was on a Hail Mary. That's cool that Callaway is enough of a baller to go up and get it. The other one was on a complete wide open corner route that the defense blew the coverage on. So Deontay Harris, maybe if he actually misses a bunch of time with the hamstring injury, you're feeling good. But I'm definitely not going out of my way to get Callaway with the bye coming on this week. We also have Tim Patrick, who keeps doing Tim Patrick stuff. 4 or 5 games this year, he has either scored or gone for at least 89 yards. We got the Raiders next week. Teddy is healthy enough. I think Patrick's a fine guy to have as, your wide receiver 5 or 6 on the roster. And then finally, Hunter Renfrow, who is one of only 5 receivers with at least 5 catches in every game this season. He's ripped off wide receiver 41, wide receiver 49, wide receiver 15, 22, and 33 performances. Gives you that nice high floor. Behind Toney, I think I would rank them full point PPR, Renfrow over Patrick. It's really close, though. I understand Patrick probably gives you the higher scoring upside. After them, Callaway slightly ahead of St. Brown, who I want nothing to do with. Dwain, thoughts?
Yeah, I would go similar. I mean, Toney's clearing away like the top 1. And then I think, Renfro's just shown enough now at this point, even though like his routes, like if the Raiders are in a game where they're not trailing, it's really dicey. Like he'll only run a route 65% of the time. They've been trailing the last 2 weeks, so you've had 80% routes run and 85% route run because they're in 11 personnel the whole time. But if you look at it for just like the rest of the season, I would definitely go Renfrow. If I'm looking at it, I need it for a week or 2 because you'll have Jerry Jeudy back eventually. I agree that Tim Patrick gives you more upside. So if I was looking at a matchup where I was like, I just need the ceiling this week for my matchup to get through my bye week or for the next 2 weeks, then I would put Patrick, over Hunter Renfrow. But as far as rest of the season, yes, Renfrow would be over Patrick. And then I would say the next on the list would be Callaway. With Callaway, it's kind of interesting. Like, you do wonder, like, could getting a Michael Thomas or someone else that's actually any good back maybe help him? Because right now he's having to be everything. And he hasn't been able to pull that off. But look, a lot of receivers aren't able to pull that off. So I'm interested in Callaway, but yeah, you have the bye week coming this week. But his routes have been up 2 out of the last 3 weeks. But I can't tell you when they're going to happen, Ian. They're kind of all over the place with this offense. Week 4 and 5, 79% and 80% of the routes run, for Callaway. But he'll have these weeks like week 3 where he's at 59%. So it makes him a little tough. And so that would be my order. And I'm with you. It's like St. Brown, I like him, but he's kind of like he's more like, Hunter Renfrow, except, he's on a much lesser team. He's really just the slot option. And even though they trail all the time, he still only gets out there 70% of the time. So that tells you if the Lions are able to lead ever by any, for some stretch of the game, like he'll be non-existent. So, yeah, I think you got the order right.
Quickly on tight end, hopefully you guys managed to scoop up Dawson Knox last week. If not, I think these are the top 5. Ricky Seals-Jones going up in a revenge game against the Chiefs. We saw him at 99% snaps last week, basically take over full-time for Logan Thomas. And if you saw this game, people, he looks like a wide receiver. Why? Because he used to play wide receiver. This is not your, dad bod tight end plodding along. He is a legit pass game weapon. And I think in this matchup, again, against the league's worst scoring defense, Ricky Seals-Jones deserves to be the week's #1 streaming option. But if you're looking more long-term, and Dwain, you made this point last night, I do think Dan Arnold probably is your next best bet. 73% snap rate yesterday with 8 targets. I think the only reason he's probably not going to be a bigger deal in a lot of these waiver wire stuff is because Jacob Hollister happened to be the guy to score a touchdown. So we were all in on James, not all in, but we like James O'Shaughnessy after week 1 because of this every down usage, and that appears to be what Arnold has. And Arnold, like RSJ, is pretty much a receiver playing tight end that is being given the benefit of a near every snap role. So with Arnold, they traded at least one draft pick for him. I do think it makes sense for them to feature him moving forward in an offense that doesn't want to throw the ball to Marvin Jones and Laviska Shenault. Why not Dan Arnold? Fuck it, right? After that, we got Hunter Henry going up against the Cowboys. His targets have been going up, but I just refuse to believe that Geno Smith is going to be completely disregarded from this passing game like this. Okay, Henry scored the last 2 weeks. If you need to pick between Henry and Geno, okay, give me Henry at this point, but I'd rather just focus on one of these other guys that I think has more of an every snap role and higher target ceiling. Finally, David Njoku. Guys, it was a great game. He's a great player. This happens. Austin Hooper scores touchdowns 1 week. Harrison Bryant could very well be the guy next week. Just realized weeks 1 through 4, Njoku had 10 targets. Week 5, he had 7. There's no real reason to expect him to completely just shoot to the top of his Cleveland passing game. And then finally, someone that you just really shouldn't touch is Cam Brate. Gronk is, quote unquote, from Bruce Arians, very close to returning from the rib injury. And last week, his snaps got cut in half anyway. So don't do Cam Brate. And then I would say RSJ #1. If you want someone long-term for the year, I put Dan Arnold there as like a 1B, and then Henry as my #3. How do you feel about that, Dwain?
Yeah, I would put Hunter Henry first. I mean, it's been enough of a trend now. Like, and he's a former, he was a former first-round pick, for the Chargers. He might have been a second-round pick. I'm trying to remember now, but like he's got draft capital. They went out and signed him. And look, John is just not playing at all. Like I don't get it. Like, it's crazy how little he's playing. So even if Geno Smith doubled his snaps, like, it wouldn't even matter to Hunter Henry. Like, that's how bad Geno Smith's playing time has been. So I do like Hunter Henry as the season-long option as well as the #1 option for the week. Then I would say if you wanted to categorize, like, to your point, like, hey, I just need a tight end for 1 week, it would be Ricky Seals-Jones and then Dan Arnold. But if I'm similar to you, if it's more about the rest of the season, then I would say my #2 is Dan Arnold. So I would go Hunter Henry, Dan Arnold, then Ricky Seals-Jones, and then I really don't want anything to do with the other 2.
Yeah. Okay, I'm with you on not wanting the other 2. Hunter Henry to #1, like, where are we going to rank him, you think? Over, like, top 10 at this point? Because I don't know, man.
No, I don't think we're going to rank him at top 10, but I don't think I'm going to rank the other 2 in the top 10 either. And I think for the course of the season, I would rather bet on his draft capital and talent And the trend that I'm seeing in utilization that's been up, over the last 3 weeks, it looks good. I mean, he's been tight end 19, 11, then 4. He's tight end 8 on the season now. Nobody knows. Hunter Henry's tight end 8.
As much as people want to crown Mac Jones already, I just don't think this passing game is looking. Dude, he is like 4 for 19 on passes thrown 20 yards downfield. Henry is going to need 5+ catches a week to clear 50 yards. Like, you don't care at all about
that's all we need.
Ups.
But that's really all we need at tight end.
But we can get more. We have actual receivers that are playing tight end in Washington and Jacksonville. I don't know why. I'm sure they're massive liabilities as blockers, but we don't have to worry about it for some reason.
Yeah, I'll stick with Henry.
All right.
I get what you're saying, and I do like Dan Arnold. I mean, look, popping up with a 26% target share, like basically after you just got off the bus. I know he played the week before, but really like shouldn't have even probably been in that game. So I think that does say something. It's got to be it's just there for Laviska Shenault owners to be really excited, or managers to be excited about, is Dan Arnold and his 26% of the targets.
All right, week 6, Dwain and I are at each other's throats over RSJ, Dan Arnold, and Hunter Henry. You gotta love it. Hey, that's why we go back and forth, and it's up to you, the listeners, to go ahead and make that decision for your squad. So I want to thank everyone, as always, for tuning in to this edition of the PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. And just want to say, NFL Week 5 is in the books, which means PFF has data and grades for every single player who logged a snap last week. What can you get with the PFF sub? Well, all of PFF's locked article content, PFF's NFL and college football betting dashboards, 0 to 100 grades of every single player, including the top rookies on every team, our player prop tool, which shows plus minus value for every NFL prop, and more. So check out the highest graded players from week 5 and look to find early value on spread picks and player props for week 6. Also, another week of the NFL season means another shot to win big at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. New customers can bet just $1 on any NFL game and win $100 in free bets if either team scores a point. Last 0-0 tie in the NFL was in 1943. Would say this is a no-brainer. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use promo code PFF. Throw down $1 on any NFL game and win $100 in free bets if either team scores a point. That's promo code PFF this week at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Must be 21 or older. New Jersey, Indiana, or Pennsylvania only. New customers only. Minimum $5 deposit, $1 wager, 1 per customer. Restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Also want to thank our proud sponsors at Western and Southern Financial Group. While you focus on your roster moves, Western and Southern helps advance your money moves, buying your first home, planning to start a family, wondering how to make your money grow. Western and Southern's playbook of life insurance, investment, and retirement solutions helps you rest assured on game day. So team up to identify your needs and address your goals with a game plan built just for you. Get started at westernsouthern.com. And after you're done organizing your money, why not organize your ball hair? Because it's football season, baby. You know what that means. It means we're going for 2 here with the sponsor of today's show, Manscaped. Listening through his hairs has never been easier. It's time for you to join 2 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped by using code PFF at manscaped.com for 20% off and free shipping. It's 3 and out the window with all of the trimmers. Go tame that Wildcat offense. Get 20% off and free shipping with the code PFF at manscaped.com. 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com and use code PFF. Dwain, you got the utilization report out on Tuesday. We'll be back here on Tuesday to break down every single game ahead of week 6. Anything else you want to get off your chest?
No, man. Well, I would say one thing. I know this is a waiver wire show, but if you can go trade for DeVonta Smith, you can buy low right now. It's the time. The utilization is there. He's the clear number 1 on his team. It just hasn't popped yet, and he's still wide receiver 31. But I think you would know better than me, Ian, but I know for sure 2 touchdowns that have been called back on him, for the season. He had another one this past week that was, an OPI, offensive pass interference.
I've seen worse ones, basically. Though.
Yeah. It's a rub, it's kind of a, you're just trying to create space. Patriots do it all the time. He's just the clear number 1 on his team. I mean, no one else is close. And so if he continues, just to do his thing, even if he doesn't improve, because the Eagles throw the ball so much, his 18% targets per route run is not elite, but it's really good for a rookie. But when you're on a team that throws the ball, in the top 5 in the league, it doesn't really matter. The volume levels out. Even if you're just at 18% targets per route run, you can still survive on that. But if he all of a sudden also takes a step forward, in his, growth as a rookie, the sky's really the limit for him as a player. So he's a guy that I definitely, if I can buy low and season long right now, DeVonta Smith is a player you want to get.
Love it, and we were hyping him up for the majority of this offseason as someone that was undervalued. Real quick though, Dwain, not to go on too long of a tangent. You know, I can't just mention the guys I was high on that are working out because our guy Jalen Waddle isn't exactly, you know, turning in the sort of production we were hoping for, even last week in a game without Parker and Fuller. On the one hand, this Dolphins offense just hasn't been able to move the ball like at all this year. On the other hand, like that's a problem because Jalen Waddle is in that offense. Now, apparently Tua could be back this week. I would hope that's going to be a positive for Waddle. He's the guy that they're practicing with all offseason, former Bama connection, all that. Level of concern with Jalen Waddle. Do you still think that, hey, you know, if you have him on your bench, just try to hold on and wait it out for that explosion? Or at this point, are we looking at someone that's just going to be a wide receiver for more weeks than not?
No, I'm holding on. I mean, because the talent's still there. I mean, the routes are not great, but they're good. Targets per route run are right where we just talked about for DeVonta Smith at 18%. So good, not great. That's good for a rookie, though. That is good. Targets, 20% for the season. So, look, he's sitting at wide receiver 39 right now. I think that's probably about right. You know, he's going to have weeks where he's going to jump up into the wide receiver 3 conversation, weeks where, you know, he's going to be in the wide receiver 4 mix. But I think there is still upside. You know, he's a good player. You know, they can do more with him. The biggest thing is really like the way they're using him, Ian. Like it's his average depth of target is 4 on the year. You know, so it's a 2.8, a 4.3, a 5.0. So they're not getting him involved in the vertical passing game at all. So he's very similar to Laviska Shenault, like in that way. Like they just want to use him around the line of scrimmage. But Waddle has game-changing speed. Shenault doesn't. So I think there's a greater opportunity for his application on the field to be expanded, right? Because he has other gears to his game. You know, and I'm not trying to say Shenault can't be a good player because he can, but Waddle has something that Shenault doesn't. Waddle has game-changing speed to get over the top on defenses, and they're just not using it right now. But that at least keeps the door open, and you know, for that, you know, to come to fruition. Who knows what's going to go on with Will Fuller, how long he'll be out. But I want to get Tua back. It hasn't been great having, you know, Brissett for the last week and for the last 3 weeks. But Brissett's really kind of changed every week, you know, who he's gone to. Week 1, it was Waddle and Gesicki. Then this past weekend, it was everything was to Myles Gaskin, which we didn't even, I mean, good grief. Like, that's a maddening situation. Like, you never know when to start Myles Gaskin. You know everyone's starting Myles Gaskin next week, and they're going to be disappointed.
Malcolm Brown, like 20 carries confirmed. Okay, yeah, I'm with you. DeVontae Smith definitely is the buy low. We're feeling like he could have legit wide receiver 1 upside by the time it's all said and done this year. Waddle, don't panic too much, but yes, might be.
I think what freaks you out with a player like Waddle is when you see someone like Toney come onto the field and just electric explode. You know? And that's what you wanted from Waddle. And so I had that same kind of thought, you know, as I was working through the teams. But at the end of the day, like he's still being heavily used for a rookie, and you know, we'll see what happens when we get Tua back.
And he can go downfield. It's not like that wasn't a skill of his at Alabama. And the few times they have thrown it down there, I've seen him make fair enough plays on the ball. So does have that skill in the little tool belt. Hopefully they use that a little bit more here moving forward. You can check out my week 6 predictions for every single quarterback. Put about 6 hours of work into that today. So I don't know. Check it out. It's free. I guarantee you'll learn something. Might even enjoy yourself. Crazier things have happened. For Dwain, I'm Ian. Thank you as always for tuning in to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. And until next time, take care, everybody.